Okay. Well, the whole reason I'm running for Attorney General is I think our state desperately needs an Attorney General who's not beholden to the insiders and special interest groups in either political party. I had been thinking about running for Attorney General for a couple years. The reason that I believe I'm the best candidate is I was not recruited by the Republican Party. I don't owe any favors. And I think we need the Attorney General's office to do more on anti-corruption. If we actually want the Attorney General's office to fight corruption, it's got to be somebody like me, somebody who doesn't owe any favors and hasn't had a lot of time making deals and trading favors in their political career. I obviously have not done that. Until this campaign started, really, I was on active duty in the United States Marine Corps. I got out in the summer of 2013 as a lieutenant colonel. And I think military service gives you two things that are very important. I wish we had more people with military experience in public service. The first thing that being a veteran gives you is you can't be successful in the military and be a partisan ideologue. You have to be able to work with people from across the political and social spectrum. I've actually done that. I had a portion in my career where I did a congressional fellowship where I worked on Capitol Hill for a Republican member of Congress, and then as soon as that job was finished, the Marine Corps sent me to the Pentagon. I worked in the strategy office where I was working with the Obama administration on climate change. The Obama administration actually sent me to the 2010 United Nations climate change negotiations where I moderated a panel discussion. And they also sent me down to Brazil to talk to the Brazilians about how the DoD can play a role in addressing the impacts of climate change. So I've worked for both the Republican congressman and I've also worked for the Obama administration. I didn't talk to Todd Stern, their climate change envoy, but I talked to their number two guy. So, you know, I have done some work for both sides of the political aisle. I'm running as a Republican because that's where I am on the political spectrum. I think if you had a sliding scale where Michael Moore was a 1 and Rush Limbaugh was a 10 to get you an idea about where I'm at. I'm about a 7. So that's where I'm at on the political spectrum. But I'm running because I want to transform the Attorney General's office so it can do more on anti-corruption. And I think if that's what we want, it's got to be somebody like me who's not a political insider.
On the corruption thing, as we see in the past, the most effective corruption fighting seems to have come from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Chicago, Springfield has been involved in some cases of, where grant money has gone even into Chicago because it was state government. And usually the U.S. Attorney tells the Attorney General or other agencies to back off while it's investigating, and they have more resources than the states. So why is that not the proper place for most of this, or how much can you do and not get in their way?
I think I can do a lot. We've actually been relying on the U.S. Attorney to do most of our anti-corruption work, and the problem with that is they're only going to go after the big fish. Government corruption is systemic, I believe, in Illinois. There was a study a couple months ago that found that each person in Illinois was in essence paying a $13 a year corruption tax. If you add that up, that's over $16.8 billion per year lost to government corruption. That's a third of our budget. I'll have Christina send you the study.
I like to say bad things about the state these days. But anyway, go ahead.
Right. But anyway, according to that study, over $1,300 a person lost. $1,300. $1,300. It's actually 1,308 is the precise number.
Okay.
But corruption in Illinois, I think, is systemic. The feds are only going to go after the big fish at the very top. There is a role for the Attorney General to play. It needs to be a team effort between both the state's attorney at the county level, also the Illinois Attorney General's office, and then also the feds. But it's there's shared jurisdiction, and I've actually been on the Fed side of things. I was the head prosecutor for the Marine Corps' Western Recruiting Region where I was dealing with with state prosecutors about who was going to address Marine Corps recruiter misconduct. And it winds up you have discussions, whoever's got the best case, whoever feels like they want to take it in, you have that discussion and you work together and figure out who's going to address it. I don't think it's a viable option to just rely on the Department of Justice going forward, especially with the rise of ISIS or ISIL, whatever you want to call them. They're going to be focused on anti-terrorism. That's going to take up a lot of the federal government's resources. So I think that the Illinois Attorney General's office does have a role to play.
Okay. Am I correct? You can't take a case to court unless you go to either a local or a federal prosecutor with your evidence?
I don't think that's correct. I think it's.
I mean, a criminal case anyway.
No, that's not correct. The Attorney General can take cases in. A lot of times it's easiest if the local state's attorney says, "Hey, I want your assistance on this," then you can take it in. But I also feel like there's a lot that the Attorney General can do just to fight corruption in terms of going after the fraudulent procurements in the state.
On the issue of, I'd like to find out what your plans are for some of the roles that the State Attorney General has taken on in terms of combating consumer fraud, senior citizen exploitation,
Elder abuse.
internet crimes. Can you talk about your plans for some of those?
Well, the consumer protection piece of this is very important. The Illinois Attorney General actually has some defined statutory duties that you're supposed to do with regard to consumer protection, and I'm going to keep doing that stuff. Where I differ from Ms. Madigan is it seems that consumer protection is really her only focus. I think there also needs to be a big piece of the anti-corruption in the office as well. The first thing that I would do if I'm elected is I would initiate a bottom-up review of the roles and missions of the Attorney General's office. It's been Ms. Madigan's been in office for over a decade. It will have been 12 years at the end of this election cycle. I think you just take all the politics out of it. It's just common sense that after 12 years, you need a new set of eyes. You need a new perspective to see what the office can do to actually address the challenges that our state is facing. I don't anticipate diverting, or I don't anticipate dropping the ball on consumer protection issues. Lisa Madigan has done some good things on consumer protection. That just can't be the exclusive focus of the Attorney General's office. One of the things in my background, the first job I had was I ran a legal assistance clinic for 2 years. I think that I understand exactly how important these issues are. I've dealt with clients on this. I also think I can do a better job on addressing some key consumer protection issues that are coming up. For instance, I think I'm better positioned to actually help our veterans in the state of Illinois that are getting the runaround from the Veterans Administration with regards to their health care. I think my background is the fact that I was in the military for 24 years, being on the receiving end of socialized medicine and healthcare rationing. I understand the frustrations that our veterans are going through, and I think I can empathize better with them than Ms. Madigan can. Another area that I think I can do better on consumer protection is there is a big threat to our medical and financial privacy with the new Affordable Care Act. And that doesn't matter whether or not you support or oppose that piece of legislation. If you're intellectually honest, you will realize that we now have a whole new set of bureaucrats that have access to people's medical and financial privacy. I think because I'm a political outsider and I don't owe allegiance to a political party, I'm going to be much more willing to shine a light on violations of people's medical and financial privacy.
Credit card fraud is an issue that has affected probably most of us in this room, I'm going to say. In your opinion, whose role is it to protect people? Is it up to the consumers to protect themselves? Is it the banks? Is it the businesses? Who should that be falling to protect from these hackers getting into people's credit card information? Well,
I think there's a shared responsibility all around to to try to protect that information, and there's certainly a role for the Attorney General, but I would say the Attorney General's role needs to really help enable people and businesses to protect that information.
Talk a bit about why you would limit yourself to 2 terms. You know, if you haven't been into the office yet, you know, would 8 years be enough to do the kinds of things you're talking about here?
I think it would be, and I think it's just a good idea for people to limit the amount of time they serve, because as human beings we lose our sense of perspective, and I think even with the best of intentions, people lose their perspectives, and that's actually, I think that there's two recent examples of Lisa Madigan losing her perspective. One was the arguments that she submitted to the various circuit courts on the pensions challenge. That argument, which was basically, in times of an emergency, a state under its police power can ignore constitutional provisions. I think if a new associate made that argument at a law firm, it might be a resume-producing event. That's a ridiculous legal argument, and it makes me upset as somebody that served 24 years to support and defend our constitutions. The idea that constitutional provisions are waived in a time of emergency is completely backwards. It's actually our constitutional provisions that protect us from politicians citing emergencies as a basis of dubious legislation. So I think that's one area that's one instance where it shows that she's lost her perspective. The other instance where she's lost her perspective is she should not be giving legal advice to the people that are investigating this neighborhood recovery initiative. That is a conflict of interest that is glaring to everybody, apparently except Lisa herself. The investigators, it's in their interest to have as much information come out as quickly as possible. It's not in her interest to have information come out. It's in her political interest to minimize the amount of information that comes out. This neighborhood recovery initiative fell underneath her jurisdiction, underneath her control. At the time that this all happened, Lisa Madigan was the co-chair of the Illinois Violence Prevention Authority. She was in a position to provide oversight on that neighborhood recovery initiative. Nobody argues that point. She didn't. She either did not provide any oversight, or, worst case scenario, she actually knew some of the questionable practices that were going on and did nothing. If I was a prosecutor arguing this case, I'd actually be asking people to make an inference based on the email that was sent to her chief of staff just a couple days after the election, saying, now that the election's over, can you approve the bonuses or the pay raises for the NRI staff? You're not going to send an email like that asking to approve bonuses or pay raises unless you've been keeping the chief of staff informed. So the logical inference from that email that was sent, I think it was from Barbara Shaw to Ann Spillane, is that the Attorney General's office actually knew about some of the questionable practices that were going on with this neighborhood recovery initiative.
And their response to that has been what?
Well, Lisa Madigan's response to me calling on her to recuse herself from giving any legal information was, she actually said, I give legal advice to elected officials all the time. This is no different. I'm not recusing myself. Well, it's completely different. It's not even remotely analogous. She doesn't give legal advice to people that are investigating her own program. So that just really shows that she has lost her perspective.
When you said that she had the improper argument for the state pension bill, do you think the pension bill as passed is unconstitutional?
I think it is.
And so you would not defend it?
I would not defend the last section of it. There were 3 parts to that pensions fix. The last part is blatantly unconstitutional. The part about cutting it's either a cost of living adjustment, right? I think that is unconstitutional, and there is no way you can salvage that.
So you think the 3%? You'd be happy about this? The 3% has to stay.
Don't disappoint.
That's right. So what does the state do about that fiscally? Do you have any solution to that, or is that not the purview of this office?
Well, I have actually on the campaign trail. I have actually said that if I had a solution to the pensions problem, I'd have been running for governor instead of for attorney general. I get it. We've got to do something about the pensions. I realize that if something is not done, the people of Illinois are just going to get crushed under an avalanche of property taxes. But I believe that whatever solution we come up with has to be prospective in nature, and it has to be constitutional. An unconstitutional solution is not a solution at all. If you want to make changes that are prospective in nature, I'd be open to supporting that. If you wanted to actually try to argue that some of these pension provisions are unconscionable under contracts law, because that's how they're supposed to be analyzed, is under contracts law. If you want to try to argue that they might be unconscionable and set up like a pensions review board or something like that to address the ones where people came in, basically got a job 1 year before they retired and then got an inflated pension at that final position, I'd be willing to look at that. I think you could argue that might be constitutional, but to cut the annuity or cut the cost of living adjustment for people that are already retired and have relied on the state and have been paying in all these years, that to me is blatantly unconstitutional, and I don't see how you can defend that.
And when you say you would be open to things prospectively, does that include current state employees who could have their benefit levels changed? Because, for example, the candidate for governor in and we might have been on this, but I can't remember. The candidate for governor of your party wants to go, okay, you've got your benefits up to now, you've been a 25-year state employee, but starting the 26th year, you're on a 401k plan and you're no longer defined benefit. Is that constitutional?
I think if you've relied on the state, it's probably not. You have to get. I think it's not going to be constitutional if somebody has been, they're 1 year away from retirement after however many years of service, and you say, sorry, you're out of luck. You didn't just retire. If you've relied on the state, if there's been significant reliance, that's a contract that needs to be enforced. I don't want to comment on Bruce's plan because honestly, I don't know what it is. I've heard different things. I know you've tried to lay it out for me. That doesn't match with some of what I've heard him say on the campaign trail.
It's different that people would have some sort of choice or something.
Well, Bruce has been very clear that the changes have to be prospective in nature, and that
really also that it is.
And that
current employees up until today, the benefits you've earned you have, but from here on it would be 401k style.
Well, some of the rhetoric that I've heard from him recently doesn't match that description, and it's at campaign events. It's not on the record everything's on the record, but it's not something that's been put in writing that I've had a chance to look at.
I would like to ask about this prosecutorial thing again, because I know under attorneys general, including Roland Burris, we've had like statewide grand juries that could bring charges.
Mm-hmm.
But still, I don't recall any case in all the years I've been watching this where the state attorney general goes to court as the prosecutor of a criminal case. Are you saying that there is such a mechanism, and what is that mechanism, and has it ever been used?
Well, it's actually I think it was just used in Rock Island County, where they asked the local state's attorney asked the attorney general to handle a case.
The Attorney General's office has always helped local states' attorneys, as you can have a broader scope and have more knowledge in these areas, so you help us. So you're an assistant Attorney General, you help us try our case, but it's not your original case. Is it ever the original case of the Attorney General's office?
Well, it's the case if what you're saying by original case, I don't think that's actually like a legal term of art. It's just whoever's going to wind up having jurisdiction to take it to court. Right now, the way it's been working is we have a very reactive Attorney General's office that only will step in if the local state's attorneys basically give them the case on a platter. What I think we need to have is a proactive Attorney General's office that goes out and investigates and actually talks to some of the local state's attorneys and says, okay, we have uncovered this instance of corruption. Action needs to be taken. Here's the file. You can take it in, or if you're not going to do that, ask us to help. I don't have an ego in the process. It is all there are three groups that are involved in addressing corruption. It's the Department of Justice, it's the local state's attorney, but it also needs to be the Illinois Attorney General's office. And you don't have to take my word for that. You can take Lisa Madigan's word for that. She ran the first time on an anti-corruption platform. One of her things that she talks about, was saying, oh, I stand by my anti-corruption record, is that she had an investigation open on Rod Blagojevich. She also talks about how she's gone after, I think, the count is like 2 people in 12 years. She's got the authority to go after this stuff. I just don't think it's been a priority for her. Fighting corruption, it's kind of like, in a way, it's almost like being pregnant. You can't be a little bit pregnant. Either you do have the authority to go after this stuff and actually take meaningful action, or you don't. And if the Attorney General's office did not have the authority to take some meaningful action, Ms. Madigan's office shouldn't be saying that they stand by her anti-corruption record.
Does the office currently have enough investigative resources? And if not, what would you do to restructure and ensure that it did?
Well, I don't know exactly who they have working on it right now, because I'm not privy to the inner workings of that office. My understanding is there are upwards of, you shaking your head no, or just,
No.
okay. I understand that there's upwards of 700 attorneys working in the Attorney General's office. This is actually a very large office, and the Attorney General has the authority to have her folks work on whatever she wants them to work on. I do intend to address the resources and structure of the office when we do this, when I initiate this bottom-up review of the roles and missions of the office. And it's actually what this bottom-up review is actually modeled on is going to be the quadrennial defense review that the Department of Defense does every 4 years. The concept of a comprehensive bottom-up review is actually something that leaders agree on across the political spectrum. It's been very effective for the Department of Defense. What the Department of Defense does is every 4 years they take a look at how is the Department of Defense accomplishing its mission? What can we do better? What has changed? How do we need to update? And over a 6-month process, the department produces 200-page document or so, but it is a comprehensive review process that basically sets the direction for how the department is going to go. Hillary Clinton actually was such a fan of this process that when she became Secretary of State, the first act that Hillary Clinton did was she initiated a quadrennial defense and diplomacy review, a QDDR, not just a QDR, but a QDDR modeled on the Department of Defense's review that it does. I had the opportunity to participate in that when I was in the strategy office of the Office of Secretary of Defense. I helped write the energy and climate change section of that document. So I've seen how those reviews are supposed to work. I think that's one of the things that makes me very well qualified to be our next Attorney General.
How long would such a review take?
I would anticipate 3 to 4 months.
And do you think staffing levels are about right, or do you not know yet? Because that's a budgetary question as well.
It is. I would look to evaluate that in the bottom-up review. I will say this: I understand the financial realities that the state of Illinois is facing, and I don't anticipate asking for more staff and bigger budgets.
Do you know how many of those estimated 700 attorneys are designated to work with various state agencies and their legal offices?
I do not.
I know that's part of what they do.
That is part of the job. The Attorney General's office, my understanding is that it's divided into a number of sections. You know, one is for consumer protection, one is to interact and liaise with the state agencies. I believe she has a section that actually is supposed to support veterans, and then there's also one that's supposed to be doing some corruption work, I believe.
Does that information ever show up in the annual budget book that says here's how many staff are in the Attorney General's office and here's the division where they work? Or? To
tell you the truth, I have not researched that. I've got my hands full trying to put together it's been put together, but trying to run a statewide political campaign, and that's been a little bit of a bigger challenge for me than most other candidates will face, because I did not get any meaningful assistance from the state Republican Party. I really did start this process from scratch. I was not recruited. My local Republican county party had wanted me to run for a judge position. So you know, I was not pushed into this. I didn't have any political patron. I really did start this with just 2 volunteers, my wife and my mother-in-law, just one campaign website and 0 donors. And it's been a challenge putting this together, because the Republican Party wrote this race off once Lisa Madigan decided to seek re-election.
But are you getting help from the state Republican Party now?
I'm not. I get a lot of great support from the local counties, and the precinct committeemen, the boots on the ground, are very excited about my campaign. We've got some great volunteers, but I'm not getting any financial support from the state party or from some of the other well-funded statewide campaigns.
So does that make you an independent?
No, I am actually, as I said, I'm a Republican because. I'm running as a Republican because that's where I'm at on the political spectrum. You know, I will say I think I'm a lot closer to the center than my opponent is. I doubt she's been ripped on the left-wing blogs the way I've been ripped on the right-wing blogs. But I'm running as a Republican because that's where I'm at. But this is actually, you know, this is an unprecedented opportunity that we have here in the state of Illinois, because you have a statewide candidate from a major party who doesn't actually owe any favors. Nobody's got their hooks in me.
Is the right-wing blog anger, is that about the abortion thing we once talked about, or what kind of stuff? Because don't you have a kind of a different view of what should be legal and not?
Well, my position on, I consider myself pro-life. Some of the purists on that issue do not. I want to change our culture so that, you know, it becomes eventually as unthinkable to kill an unborn child as it is to strangle a newborn infant. But I think you have to change the culture before you change the law. So what I would like to see right now is I would like to see, you know, common sense, you know, provisions passed that increase our respect for life. I think that a viable unborn child should receive legal protection, and that's, you know, I've gotten criticized by.
Isn't there a number of weeks that you say, or what?
Well, I said that I'm not an OBGYN, but my understanding of viability is it's about 16 weeks, maybe. So I have I did get criticized as being pro-abortion because of that.
Because you said abortion would be okay up until that point.
I said that I would like legal protection at that point. I've also been people have said I'm not a conservative because I don't think that climate change is a hoax. You know, those seem to be the two big hot button issues.
Given your climate change background or whatever, what should happen to the Illinois coal industry, or do you want to go there? I mean, you know, do you have any thoughts? Because obviously that's a big political issue between the two. Let's leave the coal industry alone, or let's put more controls on CO2 emissions.
Well, I think that I'm actually, I would say I'm probably a centrist on climate change. I will always, and this is kind of where I talk about being not beholden to the party orthodoxy. I will always put people over political rhetoric, And I have some friends that are good, intellectually honest people who are climate scientists, and they think that this is a challenge that we are facing. So I don't think this is a hoax. At the same time, what I'm all about solutions and coming up with something that's actually going to make a difference. I don't think that the proposed cap and trade program or the EPA regulations are actually going to do anything to solve the problem. I think all those are going to do is just kneecap our economy with China and the developing world, moving past us in terms of emissions that are coming up. I think we need to be focusing on adaptation. We need to be spending more money on the science and figuring out, what exactly is going to happen and how do we need to adapt to it. The thing that I always, and I'm using up my 45 minutes talking about climate change, but it's the thing that I always, when I talked to my friends, the thing that they were never able to answer satisfactorily for me is I would say, okay, I understand the theory. I will accept that the CO2 is actually going to cause increased temperature, but you admit that the Earth is a complex system that we don't understand. How can we model for resiliency on a system that we don't understand? And they never were able to give me a good answer for that, and I think that's why why the models have been wrong, because the models were saying that we were going to be significantly hotter by now, and it's kind of plateaued. What I worry about is that some of the dirty energy is actually putting sulfate particles into the atmosphere that's cooling the planet, and we're just waiting until the CO2 gets to the point where it can overcome it, and then we might have another temperature spike again.
On the issue of government transparency, how do you feel Attorney General Madigan has done with that, and what would you do? What would you change in terms of FOIA? Stay the course. What are your thoughts?
Well, the only thing that I think she has made a mistake on is when she tried to have the personal information of I believe it was the FOID card owners published. I disagree with her on that. There's a FOIA exception that allows, basically you're not supposed to endanger people with FOIA disclosures. So I would have handled that differently. But overall, I'm not going to criticize her on the FOIA stuff. I think FOIA is very important. As somebody that's dealt with FOIA requests, that was one of the things that I handled when I was the head lawyer for Marine Corps Installations Command. That was my last job while I was on active duty in the military. I do realize that the FOIA process can be abused if there's proposed remedies for those abuses. I'd entertain looking at them. I think that that FOIA could probably be improved on, but I'm not going to be critical of her on that.
How do you think local governments are doing on the FOIA matter? Obviously, this is an important issue to newspapers and the media. Have you studied up on?
I haven't observed how the local Illinois governments are doing. I suspect that they are actually doing a decent job, because I've had a lot of local officials complain to me about FOIA and the burdens that it has. So I tend to think that if they were not doing a good job trying to comply with the law, they would not be complaining to me about its onerous nature.
One of the consumer kind of areas these days is for-profit colleges. I think Corinthian is one of those, and I think the Attorney General has been involved in just trying to make sure that students are not being snookered into paying for things and getting in debt for things that they can't do. Any thoughts on that whole issue, or has that been on your radar at all?
That hasn't been on my radar. I think that's something. If I were prioritizing, I would say that anti-corruption, fighting corruption, is probably more important than going after the for-profit universities.
corruption fight? What do you want to do with the office? What plans do you have for these consumer issues? Senior citizen financial exploitation, the internet crimes against children that's become a key part of the AG's office. Are these things that you're going to pay attention or put resources into? Are these priorities for you? Do you have other priorities?
Well, my number one priority, and I think this is a bright line difference between the two candidates, is my number one priority is going to be fighting government corruption. I think that's the most acute need that the most acute threat that's facing our state. That's what I believe we need out of the office. I don't know. If you ask Ms. Madigan that question about what her number one priority is, I don't know what her answer will be. I think in the column that your newspaper ran for, she said her number one priority was protecting children. So I don't know how she would answer that question. But my number one priority would be fighting corruption. I'm not going to ignore the consumer protection stuff. That's part of the duties of the Illinois Attorney General's office. The way I think that we have the bandwidth to do both consumer protection and corruption, and you're asking me what else I'm going to do besides focus on government corruption, I'm going to try to get the Attorney General's office, to the extent that I can, out of the patronage business. I don't think the Attorney General's office should be dispensing grants. I don't think the Attorney General's office should have been part of the Illinois Violence Prevention Authority. Now I realize the Violence Prevention Authority has been repealed by statute. But Ms. Madigan, I think for the length of that program, it was something like 12 years. She was the co-chair of that program. You can't effectively be somebody that is fighting corruption and investigating corruption if you're somebody that's giving out political patronage. You can't police yourself. That's one of the things that I tell people. It's not the governor's job to fight corruption. I've heard Bruce Rauner say that he's going to take on corruption if he can get some of the ethics legislation changed. That's great, but it's not his job to fight corruption. That needs to be the Attorney General's job.
When you say that there's all this corruption, are you talking local and state governments?
Yes.
Okay, and I mean, there's City Hall over there in our town. Are you saying, I mean, I don't mean to be naive, but is everybody taking graft if they're doing government contracts? Give me the scope of what you hear that people tell you that you think is not being investigated. What kind of stuff?
Well, I think we just have a systemic failure. We have, for example, in the city of Chicago. I've talked to business owners, restaurant owners who, depending on what level inspector comes by, that's how much the bribe is supposed to be to get them to not write you up with a negative report.
So that's
The
still going on.
Mirage Tavern is still alive.
Yeah, I was going to say, remember the Mirage Tavern, or are you old enough for that?
I'm not old enough for that.
Sometimes, and Better Government Association opens something and film inspectors coming in.
Just called us old, Bernie.
Sorry, myself.
I'm older than I look. I'm 43, but I'll be 44 in February.
Yeah. Anyway, so you think it's systemic?
I think it is.
Other places in the state too.
I think it is very systemic in the state. I think one of the ways that we get behavior to change is if we have a former Marine Corps prosecutor sitting in the Attorney General's office. I think that will send a message in and of itself.
And you probably had this question before, but why aim statewide first? Judge was an option, but maybe you didn't just want to wear a robe all the time. But why aim statewide when you've never run for anything before? Am I correct? You've never run for anything before?
That's correct. Really, the reason is when I took my uniform off, that didn't change who I am. I'm still the same person. I believe you have a duty to serve, and I think if we are ever going to change the dynamics of Illinois government, we need more out of the Attorney General's office. We need a fundamentally different Attorney General's office. And if we want that, it's got to be somebody like me coming in as a credentialed outsider. somebody that has worked their way up through the party is going to just owe too many political favors. People are going to, have their loyalty. I think that a Republican insider, a career politician Republican, is no better than a career politician Democrat when it comes to the Attorney General's office. I really think we need somebody like me who's coming in from the outside. And that's one of the things that I say on the campaign trail is I tell people this election is actually, it's a referendum on the political system that has let our state down. Think about, when you go home and you talk to your family about how you wish, what kind of political system you wish we could have. We wish we could have a system where it was competent, qualified people who are actually getting elected with nothing to do with family connections or the amount of money that they can bring to the table. Our political system is broken, and it needs to be fixed by actually having qualified people come forward and do the job that they're qualified to do. My time in the Marine Corps has actually given me a background that's perfect for this office. I talked about how I've had to work with both Republicans and Democrats. That's something that's par for the course in the military. But I've also had the opportunity to start up new offices. I've had the opportunity to take challenges that I haven't been prepared for. With my last job in the Marine Corps, I was the head lawyer for Marine Corps Installations Command. That was a brand new command. I was the one that stood up the legal office. When I went over to Iraq to work on the Saddam Hussein trial, I was leading a team that was Department of Justice, U.S. Marshals, State Department, and it was Iraqi law that I'd never worked in that area before. But I had that experience, and I was successful. If you're in, if you're in the military, you have to change jobs a lot. I just think between that, my background working on the Quadrennial Defense Review, I don't think you could script up a candidate who would be better to transform the Attorney General's office if you want it to be transformed. And that's really what this election is about. It's what kind of Attorney General's office we want to have. If people are happy with the status quo, I tell them go ahead and vote for Lisa Madigan again. I've heard she's a nice lady. I've never met her, but there's nothing that would lead me to believe, that she's a bad person. There's just apparently there's a completely different vision for what the office should be.
Can we talk about guns for a little bit?
Sure.
What is your opinion on the state's concealed carry law? Do you see any flaws with it? Any changes that need to be made?
Well, the problem I had with the state concealed carry law was just the fact that we had to be drug kicking and screaming to that point via a lawsuit. I believe we need to have a concealed carry law that matches with what the constitutional requirements are. The concealed carry law, as it's implemented right now, I'm satisfied with.
And in your opinion, do we have a gun violence issue in Illinois or in the country? Whichever way you'd like to answer it. And if you do think that, what do you do?
Well, I think we have a problem with violence in the country. I think that the underlying causes are the fact that we have the economy limiting people's opportunities, and we have the breakdown of the family, and our society is just becoming much more violent. I blame that on the entertainment industry and the breakdown of the family much more than I do on the people that lawfully own guns.
What do you mean when you say breakdown of the family?
Well, I think that it benefits children to grow up in a stable family. I think that the divorce rate is going through the roof. I think that that's a problem.
In the media, do you think violent video games should be banned from kids under 18 or something?
No, I don't support censorship. What I'm frustrated about is if I were going to throw darts at the media, it would be just what you all decide to cover, just kind of the sensationalism of the of the news. It appears sometimes that it's more, that the news media is sometimes just a subset of the entertainment industry. And I don't mean to offend anybody, but it's the whole if it bleeds, it leads type of culture. I mean, it's to me it's a sad indictment on our culture that we all know that Bruce Jenner and Kim Kardashian are splitting up now, but we don't know the name of the last person that got awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. It's our priorities as a society are misplaced.
If I may indulge, just because you worked in Iraq and
Sure.
And advised, I guess, the Iraqi prosecutors about how to deal with the case. Just any reaction to what's happening with ISIL or ISIS or whatever, and the way that country is going?
Well, it does break my heart, all the sacrifices that that were made over there, and it now looks like it's coming all to naught. I worked with the judge on the Saddam trial, the judge who sentenced him to death. He was caught by ISIS and they executed him. That was a couple months ago. The lesson that I draw from Iraq is really, Ben Franklin was, we all knew that he was a genius, but it's just, his point, you've got a republic if you can keep it. That famous quote that he made after the Constitutional Convention, that just shows how hard it is to actually keep a democracy. And that's one of the reasons that I'm running, is we need to, I worry about the direction that our democracy is going right now. I think when I was in the strategy office, that was the office that looked at threats to the United States 30 years out. I think our biggest threat that we're facing is we're becoming an increasingly polarized society. There's way too much venom in our political process, and I do realize that there's always been that. You had the story of a senator getting caned on the floor of the Senate and the lead up to the Civil War, but it used to be that it was just at the fringes that there was so much hatred. It used to be that there was a much more apolitical, decent middle. And I fear that middle that treats each other decently is actually shrinking. And part of that is due to the information revolution. It's wonderful that we've all got the smartphones and we've got access to news, but the unfortunate reality is that we go where we're comfortable to get our news, and a lot of times it just becomes an echo chamber. So you have people either going to the far right or the far left, and we're just becoming a more polarized society. So in addition to believing that we need more out of the Attorney General's office, I also wanted to run just because I think it takes one candidate at a time to try to change our level of discourse. And I've been critical of Ms. Madigan because there's different visions for what the office should be. But I've tried to run the type of campaign where I say the voters should elect me because I can do a better job, not because Lisa Madigan is a bad person.
We hit our 45 minutes.
Sure.
Is there anything that we have not talked about that you would hope to talk about yourself? Is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
Well, I would just, the only thing that we really didn't touch on is we didn't go too much through my background, and one area where I believe another area where I believe that my background is significantly better than Ms. Madigan's is just the fact that I've had prosecutorial experience. I was the head prosecutor for the Marine Corps' Western Recruiting Region, and being a prosecutor, I think, gives you two things. I think you have to have the mentality that you're going to go where the evidence leads you, you're not going to be trying to protect certain individuals. You're not going to be limiting your focus to certain areas. You're going to go where the evidence leads you. And the other thing is, being a prosecutor, if you're a good prosecutor, your job is to seek justice, not to seek convictions. And, that was my mindset as a prosecutor. I actually had a case where I probably could have gotten a conviction if I had not followed the ethical rules for an attorney. There was something where I had a witness that I didn't put on because I knew that they were going to. If I would have wanted to, I could have coached them to say something, and then if that witness had been on, talking to the jury afterwards, they said, "Well, we would have convicted," but I wasn't going to do that because that was not ethically right to do it. So I think it's important that the people of Illinois know that I've got the background of a prosecutor, and if we want the Attorney General to actually go after government corruption, it needs, I think having a prosecutor's background is very important.
Kind of, and I realize this story's kind of new, but Apple and Android saying that their phones are encrypted in a way that police they're not going to be able to access email information and some other things for prosecutors and police. Any kind of thoughts about that? Have you seen that?
So they're trying to say that in the event that they receive a subpoena, they won't be able to. They
literally cannot de-encrypt or whatever. I mean, it's set up in a way that.
Well, I guess that would be something that would make them a good product for somebody that definitely values their privacy. Then, it's all about whether the data is accessible and they can get to it. If a company wants to create a device that doesn't save any data or doesn't allow data to be retrieved, that's the choice of the company.